totally use those, Brooke.
What?
I'm gonna totally use those. To your teacher.
I'm your teacher that's not ridiculous. So.
Oh, we started already?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. I said we're going.
Yeah, you did say that. Go for it then.
Maybe I thought that the first question on chapter 3 was kind of interesting. And thinking about that's on page 72. Talking about like your experience with learning a foreign language and like what strategies you saw your teacher using and what orientation and techniques they had. Kind of discussing our experience with that.
I took French for 2 years, and I think a lot of it wasn't the best for a lot of learners, and because it was like all directly from the book. It was like we do our vocab list, we take that vocab test, between then we like practice saying them out loud or like reading parts of the text, and most of it really was just whole class and individuals. So I feel as though group work would have really benefited the class in that situation. I mean, it was still a really fun class, and I think we all learned a lot, but I think also the teacher knew how to engage us as a whole class, which like I'm amazed by now, because I'm like, how do you do that all at once?
Yeah.
And that's like the only way he did it was like whole class interactions and discussions, and so there's like pros and cons to that. Like I'm amazed that he could do that, but at the same time, maybe that's why he didn't do small groups as much and didn't focus in. And a lot of it was like rote memorization, so that can explain why I don't remember too much now. Yeah.
No, my Spanish class, I took 3 years of Spanish, and especially my first 2 teachers were pretty good. There's still a lot of memorization and that kind of stuff and reciting, but they did a better job of I can tell they tried to make it things that we were interested in, things we actually remember. And then my 3rd year Spanish teacher was not great. She was not great. It felt like she couldn't speak Spanish more advanced than she was teaching. It felt like she was teaching it as the most advanced Spanish she knew. So if we had questions, she'd blow us off. But I think it's because she didn't know it. Right. And then we did so much out of the textbook, and for that's when we learned a bunch of different tenses for verbs in Spanish 3. We learned Spanish 1 we just learned present, and then we learned past or future, and then it got way more complicated in Spanish 3. And I was comfortable writing it or reading it, but we almost never talked. And so almost everything I learned in Spanish 3 I was never comfortable trying to talk with, because we didn't do it in class ever. So it was and I only remember stuff from Spanish 1. I've completely forgotten everything else from Spanish. Hey, I'm a Brooke.
I took Spanish the full 4 years I was in high school. The first year I had the same
warm, so if you have open the window.
Yeah, I had the same teacher for the 4 years. But the first year, my freshman year, he was always singing songs that we needed memorized, learning the alphabet, the accents and everything, and he had posters and everything around the classroom, but just later on down the road, he took everything off, and it just became paperwork. I don't know, his teaching just kind of went downhill, and it wasn't easy because if you wouldn't do your work, he's okay, whatever. But so I didn't really learn anything that last year, so I was okay.
Do you have any reason why his teaching went so downhill?
Yeah, his dad was sick, and then he was getting a divorce, so that kind of
Oh, yeah.
That can build up.
Yeah.
I think that can do it. So we're on question 2, part 1, right? Or what are we talking about?
No, we were just it's a kind of a question that was in the book.
Oh,
but
okay.
basically it's talking about your experience with learning a foreign language and what strategies you saw your teachers use and that kind of stuff.
Okie dokie.
I think tutors just helped me when I was little, learning English. feel like I don't remember how I learned English. I kind of just learned it somehow.
Somehow.
Same here. I don't remember how I learned English. I feel like it was at school, but like I don't remember if I took special classes or anything. But in my high school, they only offered Spanish as the only other language that you could take.
Okay.
So I did take 2 years of Spanish in high school. I was in advanced Spanish and then I went to AP. And it was just kind of similar to what the examples that you were giving, like how they were bringing a bunch of like the class discussions, and she really tried to reinforce to only speak Spanish in class.
Oh, really?
Some things that I think really helped was like not only did she like teach us Spanish, but she also like took this as an opportunity to teach us about other cultures as well. Like around Cinco de Mayo, roughly, I think it was within that week, we had this thing called it was some kind of form of fair. But like what we did is that you get to like look up recipes and stuff, like for dessert, for chiles, for any kinds of foods. We make piñatas, and it was like open to the whole school. So our school was like on the floor. It's kind of like Red Square. So we had like it was like kind of like a open square. So in the center, that's where like they had like all the tents and stuff, and everyone could come and like try the foods and like kind of like rate which one did like the best and things like that. So that really, I think that really helped us learn in class, and it was a lot of fun. So I thought that was one thing that helped me at least
Yeah, that's really cool.
to write and like read.
Cool.
It was like because you had the recipes in Spanish and stuff. So like
My first year Spanish teacher did that.
Yeah.
And that was definitely, like, I clearly remember that.
Yeah.
And then it went downhill.
Yeah, and like my AP teacher, I'm like so used to calling professors now, but like my AP teacher for Spanish, he let us choose whatever song we wanted in English, and we had to translate it into Spanish. So that was a lot of fun. Like I remember I chose Billionaire by Bruno Mars featuring, or is it? Yeah, I think so. It's roughly around there. And so I translated that song into Spanish, and that was also a lot of fun.
Did you sing it?
Yeah. No. No, we just kind of, wrote it, and it was more like a writing assignment.
My cousin, she did AP Spanish at my high school, and that teacher was great. Everybody loved her, but I never got her. You could have her for any level, and I just got every teacher but her. And they did that, and she did Call Me Maybe, and then they made a music video for it for extra credit. So they have this like music video of them singing like Call Me Maybe in Spanish while like going around the playground. It's great.
Yeah. And another thing that he also had us do was like a kind of like a research paper. So you could choose any topic that you wanted. So I did something that was science related. I think it was like genetics at that time because of the science class I was taking. And so that was also a lot of fun, and I got to learn a lot of terminology at that time for like science, so that was also pretty cool. Because like he gave us the option to choose what we were interested in, so I think that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Well.
Oh, and like the story about Yvonne and stuff teaching. I also like noticed at the beginning when she was like following those ELMs, that was called. That sounds a lot like what my experience in foreign language classes were. And like, at least the last one I took was very like structured that way. Like here is your vocab list and here is this. And
So what, you feel like you learn a language better if you experience it like hands-on?
I would think so. And it feels like they've kind of shown that through the like people learning. And what was that in my part of the reading? It was like 2 different kinds of teaching. You either have functional. It's formal or functional. So like formal is when you're really like focusing on like verbs and like sentence structure and like how those work, and it's very like sequential. And like functional is like more focusing on the meaning of the sentence. So like the direct translations, like the meaning of it, and talking about how a lot of like language programs today now try to like use a combo of those two, which I thought was cool.
Yeah. Probably a little bit off topic, but as I was like doing this assignment, sometimes you like a video popped up from YouTube. It was about a guy explaining there's like 5 ways, focus points where anybody can learn a language in 6 months. I don't know, it was like a 30-minute video. I only watched like half of it. But it was very interesting because they talked about how anybody can learn a language in 6 months if the person is like forced to learn it. Like if it's like, I don't know, it's way off topic, but
No,
I thought it related because he explained how one of his colleagues wanted to learn how to type in Chinese. And she for years and years tried, but she never could like really be fluent in it. And until like her boss told her like the shipment is coming in from China and it's coming in 2 days, 48 hours, right? Yeah, 48 hours. And so like she had to know how to like type and do all the shipment orders and stuff. And then he explained the story how in those 48 hours she learned how to type in Chinese.
No, that totally ties in with, so my section is cognitive apprenticeship, and so basically that's the idea that like with any type of learning, I just talk like specifically about language, you learn it when you like carry out activities in like a certain setting, or when you have like a reason to learn it. So like if you are living in a country where you don't speak the native language, like that is a lot of motivation to learn how to speak so you can communicate with people, versus when you're in a classroom where like everyone can speak the same language and you're choosing to speak another language, that's not nearly as much motivation. I was talking about how like you're basically the apprentice to like the native speakers around you because they're helping you build up that like vocabulary and stuff. But they were talking about how it also applied to other things, like for example, like his examples, he was like an English major and he could like understand like the discourse of English majors, so like kind of the vernacular that they use. Versus like if he went into a math class since he wasn't a math major, he wouldn't know like the discourse of math majors. So it's like it can be applied to other things, but with language, that motivation is like so important.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot about that part. It's just like a motivation, like the human needs to have something to look towards, right? To learn, whether it's drawing, learning a language, or.
And so in my section 2, it like talked about the different kind of levels of like understanding a language. So like referential function is like the most basic, and so that's when you can like it allows people to like give and get like very basic ideas, kind of like survival. And then expressive function is like when you can communicate like how you feel about something. And then integrative, I'm not sure, function. And so that's when you can communicate like social standing, and like using, like, you know, you talk to like a professor differently than you talk to your peers. That's kind of the last thing that most ELL students develop, just because that's a really advanced thing to know how you need to change based on who you're talking to. So that's a question I would have is like, how, if we're not like, for the ELL students, I think that motivation that we were talking about is kind of there because they're put into classrooms where people, like, they can't communicate with people. But I guess like in teaching a foreign, like just like if you're like in a Spanish class and most people speak English and learning Spanish, like I wonder how you could provide more motivation and get that like cognitive apprenticeship idea.
I think they really have to be interested in so many things. Like a lot of people, you take this foreign language class because you want 2 years because you want to get into a university and you want that grade. But if you really want it to be something you're interested about, it has to be engaging to the students and just be something that they actually want to keep learning. I don't know.
What do you think that would look like?
I think it goes beyond the language, and so I think like what your Spanish teacher started, like going with the culture, really would help, because like there's no point in learning. Well, I think with Spanish, you are in a country where a lot of people do speak Spanish, and you can go to a lot of other countries, and it'll be super helpful. So I think that in of itself is a motivation, at least it would be for me. But for other languages, perhaps just like getting speakers in, or like going out to communities where you can see that influence. I know field trips are like very rare in high schools these days, but that's an idea.
Yeah.
you repeat your question again?
I guess how. So if that like motivation that we were talking about, this necessary to learn language, isn't just there because of the student circumstance. Because if you have like ELL students, I think that motivation is probably there because they want to be able to communicate with their classmates if they don't have the ability. But if you're like teaching a foreign language, because like you want to teach Spanish, right? Is that right? And like how could you get students engaged and make them have motivation and want to learn that language? Because that's clearly so important in learning the language. Does that make sense?
Kind of, yeah.
How to get them motivated?
Yeah, like what can you do as a teacher to help motivate them and make them realize like why they want to learn and why it's important.
Oh, that's a very good question. I mean, what would any teacher do to motivate any student to learn anything?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what you're asking. But
Yeah. I guess.
Basically, what I've seen in high school settings is just teachers following what they have to teach. And even if they do want to kind of relate other things or other projects, sometimes they can't because of time and what the state wants them and require them to teach. Because I know a lot of teachers that will think that what the state or what the school wanted them to teach is a lot of baloney. And they kind of have like their own methods of teaching, but they have to stick to the script. I don't know, they might get penalized or fired, or I don't know. But I mean, as educators, I guess we can try to motivate. And me if I was teaching another language, let's say Spanish, how would I motivate people that are not native Spanish speakers? Is that your question? Right? I don't know, like, I feel like getting them to know the culture, not only like videos, but like actually getting to know like heroic, how to say it? Heroic? No. Historical? No.
Or, I don't know.
Historical figures in the culture, right? Whether it's Spanish or Hispanic, and I think that's really important because once you start talking about like Pancho Villa or other historical figures, you know, it kind of gets you going like, oh, I can't believe that this guy did this, and managed to move this many troops, and managed to defeat an army that he just had pure workers on this and stuff like that. I think that's what motivates students. I don't know.
It's kind of random, but I took a Latin American history class like last year, and it was so interesting, and we never learn about that stuff in school because we're so Eurocentric, but it was like one of the most interesting history classes I've taken. And I was like, why wasn't this an option for like an AP history class in high school? Because that was way more interesting than most classes I took in high school. So that's my random. Why don't we do Latin American history?
History is very interesting. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you have that clear mind of seeing history as like, wow, this actually did happen.
Yeah. No, and it was really cool because like I learned about, because I took like AP Euro in high school, and so I like learned about a lot of stuff from like the European perspective, and then I would learn about the same events, but it was focused on Latin America, and it was like I was suddenly like, oh, these sound so different depending on which perspective, and it was all the same event, but like very different depending on
What side are you on?
yeah. I think about like how you could teach that in class to like actually show more sides of history than just Europe rocks colonization.
Oh yeah. That would be very, yeah.
That's my random tangent. I guess in terms of, we could move on to talking, because you kind of brought up like some policy stuff, and because that was a lot of what the reading was on too, and like how Common Core.
Common Core, yep.
Yeah. Maybe we could just start with A, and you could go through and kind of just like say what part of the Common Core you're looking at. Does that work?
Oh yeah, that's number 4, right?
What's that?
That's part
Yeah, part, yeah. That's not it. But are you A?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm starting to run people's A's.
Mine was like the ELA stands. Sorry, the ELA standards for an elementary, and I did doing this right. Okay, hold on. Okay, I did mine on the third grade literature, and I was it's saying that it had 3 levels to the language standards for the Common Core standards, which was like it relates to the realization that language is a key contributor to the requirements of all subjects, and then 2 ELA standards, which focuses on the development of communicative and academic language skills both within the subject area of ELA itself and across all other subject matters areas. And then 3, the standards that focus specifically on language emphasizes primary linguistic conventions, knowledge of language, and vocabulary acquisition. I don't remember this. Like, how can we get a third grader to meet standard? Like, just like giving them the extra help, or just
Standard. What do you mean by standard?
like the Common Core standard, like being able to read and understand what they've read and like share that with like their peers, or like writing a paragraph about what they read. Like, I think with the ELL students.
I think that's a tough one too, cause like I know, I don't know the actual statistics, but like statistically there's a lot of like ELL students that can read fluently and they can like go through a paragraph without making any sentence mistakes. But then afterward, when you're asked to summarize, it's like, I don't know what I just read. I can read it well, but I don't know what I read. So there definitely needs to be that connection between like what you're saying means something and like finding the way. I'm not exactly sure how that's explained.
I think that's how I do it with my sister. Like, she reads to me, and like every paragraph, I'm just like, oh, what did you read from this? And she's like, she goes back, I was like, just read it again and just let me know, or else I'll just like give her little hints like, oh, this person did what at this time. And she like just fills in the blanks. I think that helps.
Yeah. I also just think about like how like there's the ELA standards, but if kids can't meet these, then like on-state testing and stuff, because like so much of the math like requires you to explain what you're doing. So even if like it doesn't, it's not like it just, if they're EL students, not like it just hurts their scores in the actual like reading and writing portion of the test. It also hurts it in the math, because you can't, even if they know what they're doing, if they can't explain it in English.
Which that makes perfect sense. Actually, I'm mentoring at a ELL class right now, and I was actually helping and assisting a student in math, and I was going through over and over with him the problems and trying to understand why he's doing the things he's doing, because he didn't understand. He was just doing math just because the teacher told him this is how you do it, and that's all he can recall. And I was like, okay, well, if X is 1, then Y is 1, and then he's like, he would just look at me, and I'll be like, if X is 1, then it took him a while, and then after a while he just looked at me and laughed. He's like, man, that's so hard for me to, like, I know what it's saying, but I just can't explain it to you. And I was exactly what you guys are talking about. You know, he does understand what the question and everything's saying. It's just, it's so hard for him to explain. If he can't explain it, he can't write it down as an answer, and he doesn't get points. And so, yeah. So your question was, how do we get those students to meet the standard? Right? It would take literally like individuals like us or mentors or teachers to have to sit with each student and help them.
And I was in a 3rd grade class for my practicum, my class winter quarter, and there was a reading question that you had to read this paragraph. It was like a very factual paragraph about how they make maple syrup, and it was like, I don't know, 5 or 6 sentences long. And then there was like, you had to pick what the the overall idea of the paragraph was, and then below it had a bunch of quotes, and you had to pick 2 that justified your answer. And Miss Johnson was the teacher. There was like 3 pre-service teachers in there, and she's like, I want you to try to answer this question. And so we did it, and two of us got one answer and the other girl got a different answer. And she's like, yeah, and I sat down and did this with 3 teachers and we all got 3 different answers. And then this was like the practice test for the kids, and so she was trying to like tell them, and she's like, I don't even know what to tell you on this one because I don't know what it is, because it was so unclear. And we're like, I'm a native English speaking college student and it is not obvious what they're going for here. And you expect 3rd grade students, lots of them being ELL, to be able to figure out what the answer is. And Ms. Johnson was like, I literally cannot tell the kids what the answer is because I did it with teachers and we all have different things and we have different reasonings for it. And the test seemed to be very poorly written when we got to look at it.
Wasn't that one video talking about that video?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was saying how the policymakers need to be more realistic with the test and like find a common ground with this Common Core.
Yeah, I'm also talking about how everyone knows that it takes 4 to 7 years to learn a language, but in terms of testing, they expect them to be like a year or 2, and so
that just makes them fall behind.
Yeah.
That kind of segues into what my part was talking about, or what I was asked to do. So it was the thing with language without borders, and it's like understanding like language is not just speaking, it's movement, it's gestures, it's we apply it to everyday things, we apply it to explain space and time, we apply it to everything, and that the fact that like the policies tend to separate them as to think, and where in reality they really can't, there is no clear line and there's so much overlapping, and just trying to separate it is not going to be helpful. And so that kind of relates to the video on how the teachers like it needs to not necessarily mush them together, but they shouldn't be separated, they have to be coordinated in ways that, you know, it could be easier for students to use, to understand, and it takes time too. You have the whole thing being realistic about how long it takes to learn a new language.
No, it also even makes me think about what we were talking about earlier, like how do we get students engaged in a class, and I think that's a really good point of not separating language from everything else and making it a part of it. So I think it'd be cool to because I'm doing like the LLC route and having an ELL endorsement, but just being in like a standard classroom. And so I don't know, I would think that would make that bridging it a little bit easier, because I will be teaching all the subjects, but just have that endorsement. And so I guess that's like one way it's not separating, it's just like applying that knowledge to every subject that I teach in the classroom, and like thinking about ELL students in that instead of treating it like, oh, I'm a classroom teacher and they get pulled out an hour a day and go work with an ELL specialist and then come back in.
I was also reading what I thought it was interesting when now that we're talking about language and how they try to and things like that. I don't know if your parts asked you this, but like mine was asking me how might the authors of that article we were supposed to read discuss the way English is taught with these kind of conventions, and what might be limiting these particular standards. So as I was reading my part, it also kind of talked about, okay, so they want people to learn this type of English, standard English, I guess we could call it. But when you think about it, English here could be spoken as differently, and it could be different. It could be spoken differently, like in Texas or like in Alabama. So like it just brought up the question on how, okay, so you want to teach people this language, okay, like for example, like Chinese, but there's like hundreds of different Chinese languages. It's like, okay, so which one? And so I thought it was interesting to see how, that's probably something that the authors would talk about when I looked, because mine was for 5th grade. It's just looking at, to demonstrate command of conventions of standard English, capitalization, punctuation. It's like that's so, I don't know, it just got me thinking about like the whole thing of like, okay, so you want them to learn this language, but there's different variations of this language. And then, so I thought it was also interesting too how he also brought up the whole eliciting and like trying to separate them and everything like that. So that's also a thing to think about. I know.
The original dialect also say like English is just not English because it comes from like New England and stuff, and like there's no two languages are the same, and there's like accents to everything.
Mhm.
And it is interesting because it's like there are regional dialects and we speak differently here than someone even in California or the East Coast. And so it'd be difficult to convey that the way we speak doesn't match the nation as a whole, but in written format it is expected to, and which I think in a way makes sense because like English grammatical conventions will always be the same. A period should go at the end of the sentence. This should be capitalized, and so that basic function of knowledge should be there. But also, it's harder for them to be like, wait, I can't write exactly the same way that I speak, and if I do, that's gonna be judged, and you know. And I think that's a lot of people like that I grew up with had trouble with that, like on essays, like they type exactly how they speak, and I'm like, nope, gotta change it up. Yeah. It's just like different. And it also goes along with like formality, and those aren't the only two, 'cause like obviously you speak differently to different people, and we kind of talked about that last week, and I thought that also ties into something that was in chapter 4 for me. It's communicative competence. So not only do you know like the grammar and the language, but you know what to say in different social situations. And so it gave an example of a couple from Latin America came up and visited their friends who were like super religious, and so they were driving by something that was really pretty, and the Latin lady's like, oh my god, that's so beautiful, because in Spanish you can say like Dios mío for anything, and that's alright, but in English, like, depending on who you are, you can't say, oh my god, it's like, oh my gosh, oh my goodness, oh gosh, and so, just like, that was the example of, like, not being culturally or communicatively competent, and so, yeah. It's like, give some examples of how that ever happened to you, and for me, I think it's, like, metaphors and similes. Don't translate into Spanish. Like, I say things that like make sense in English into Spanish to my parents, and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, it makes sense, I promise.
Is that, was it like that I changed my mind? Okay.
Yeah, okay. Oh, I just changed my mind. And she's like, what? And I don't know if my parents are just like very literal people, or if that just doesn't make sense in general.
It's just like not afraid.
Yeah.
So for mine, I didn't have like a standard that I already kind of talked about the content, because mine was like the formative versus formal versus, what was the other one called? Functional. Thank you. But so I looked at the WELPA, the Washington English Language Proficiency Assessment, which is given to all students whose parents answer yes to the question, did your child first speak a language other than English? And they have to take it every year until they are considered proficient.
I think that's what I took.
Is that what you took?
I think, because that's, yeah, I had to take that test every year to make sure I was proficient enough in English, yeah.
And I was having trouble, I
was
was like, I even like Googled it on a different website, I was having trouble like figuring out what that test looked like. Do you remember what it looked like?
I just remember vaguely that, I remember I had to like write some kind of form of essay, and so I did like the typical 5-paragraph intro, your 3 body paragraphs and your conclusion. That's kind of what I did. That's all I really remember, and I think there might have been multiple choice.
Was there a speaking section? It sounded like there might have been a speaking section.
I just really remember the essay part because like, I remember I recognized this teacher and I think she knew that I'd been taking it. It was like my 3rd year taking it at the middle school, and she just told me like, just write a lot and you'll be like, I just remember she told me to write a lot and I should be able to pass the test. And so I did. Like I wrote so much for the essay portion, and that's what I remember because she told me to write a lot.
How old were you?
I was in 8th grade, so I must have been like, I graduated when I was 17. So like 13 or maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it was like in addition to all Common Core state testing stuff to take this test.
Yeah. I feel like there was a speaking portion, but I just remember the essay part because she told me to write a lot. And
Just write a lot.
Just write a lot. And I did, and I took it seriously wrote so much.
I feel like if a way for passing the test is to just write a lot, the test might not be very good.
Yeah, everyone almost ran out of room.
I'm interested in like what that looks and like
When they would consider a student proficient in English, like,
How do you grade that?
yeah,
How do you like come up with the?
how do you come up with a system? You're like, this point value and above proficient, you're not, you're below.
How do you come up with standards? Or?
and then
For
when I was like
kids.
looking up
I just like was curious, like for state testing, like what it like for ELL students, and it from like on the Common Core website it looked like their very first year in the U.S. school system learning English. If they like come in that year, they don't have to take it, but then the following year they're expected to just be able to take the test. Is what I found from looking on the website. Even though, admittedly, it takes people 4 to 7 years to get like close to proficient in a language, but then state testing, they're like, oh, 1 year max.
Don't worry about it.
No pressure.
And that goes throughout the whole state. I feel like I didn't have anything with that and somehow failing English, but they never like tested me on it. Or whether, yeah, that just maybe, is it like in every county or maybe just?
well, it's called the Washington English Language Proficiency Assessment. Looking at it, it said it's given to all students, but parents say they've spoken English other than English first. I think you could have like taken it but not
Realized you did.
Yeah. realize you were taking it.
Yeah. Like apparently I passed the WASL 1 year and I don't remember what year it was.
I remember it also. Because I was very upset when they changed the name.
Yeah, it just confused me. I was
Like
like,
it's
that
history
you know.
month.
I got like attached to the name Wassel. It was like the Wassel was coming every year, and I was getting ready for the Wassel, and then they changed the name, and I was like. And then we all took the test, and we're like, it's a new state test. I remember like my 5th grade. I think it's my 5th grade teacher talking so much about like how this is the first year. This is the year they changed it. We're not confident what it's gonna look like. And I'm sure from an educator's perspective, there probably was like differences in how they structured the test. And I remember from a student perspective, I was like, this feels exactly like the Wassel. Why did we rename it?
Yeah.
Testing is pretty much every year since like 3rd grade, right?
Yeah, but I know they change which years are high stakes.
Okay.
So like, so Miss Jefferson, I was in the 3rd grade class, and it used to be that 3rd grade he started taking the state test. About 4th grade was the high stakes year, so that was like the year that they really looked at test scores, and that had an effect on like your placement for stuff. And when I know it sounds like this changed, but like when No Child Left Behind was like first implemented, there was big effects for like teachers if their students didn't do well and stuff. And so that was 4th grade. But then like a few years ago, it changed to 3rd grade. So the very first year that these students have to take the test, it's also the high stakes year.
Oh, wow.
And so she like was trying to, and she had like a very highly impacted group of students, and like trying to prepare them for the test because they have to do so much self-management. It's like the first year they learn about like paragraphs and essays and whatever, but they have to like really manage on their own during the test, like writing that essay. And you know, it's so hard for them to realize that they really need to focus while they're preparing. And she's like, I felt like at least before, like in 3rd grade, they realized that the test was actually hard, and so then in 4th grade, when they were being told like this is the really important year, they like understood that it was hard and they need to pay attention, but they've never taken the test, and then it's the high stakes year. So I'm not sure who came up with that brilliant one.
So chapter 4, right? So my part was pretty practically explain how like language learners use these strategies. There's like 9 strategies supposedly that they use without recognizing that they're using these strategies. And it's just how they use these strategies to learn and to kind of not only learn, but kind of like sometimes hide from not knowing what the word says or how to pronounce the word, or you know. And so an example of this, what was the teacher's name?
Yvonne?
Yvonne?
Yeah. At least that's the one in chapter
3, right?
Yeah.
I talked about like an example of she uses like paraphrasing, like when she went to like other countries, and she was in other countries studying, right? Or she would talk to the maids. Like she knew everything about like the structure of Spanish and everything, but she would talk to the maids because she didn't know how to translate like objects in the house, and she would talk to the maids like when there's something was missing. She talked in the book how she would say, "Have you seen that yellow stick with that rubber on it?" And that meant like a spatula or something. So she caught herself using like paraphrasing too. Not only do kids or but any age category adults of any language learners, they use these strategies, which is like coins of a word, using a paraphrase, using a literal over asking for the words, some other avoiding words or structure or topics. I don't know about you guys, but like when I was growing up, I really didn't understand English that much, and it was really hard for me to pronounce words. I would sometimes avoid using those words and change the whole topic, just so I wouldn't use that word. I don't know if you guys ever did that. Like in a presentation, like I'll see a big word, and I was like, oh, I know that word. And so I would just change the whole topic and be like, no, let's talk about this, because I don't know how to use that word. I don't know if you guys ever did that, but I did. And I kind of caught myself too, like reading the passages. I use a lot of these strategies with my like learning English and stuff, and Spanish. So that's pretty much what I talked about.
That's interesting.
Maybe you guys have any experiences on that?
I just see the example of pushando, and that's definitely a word I normally use. So, like, to push only you like add the appropriate suffix in Spanish to create an incorrect word. So like, kind of mixture. I don't even know what the real word would be.
What's the second?
97. Empujar. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
English no points, I guess.
Where?
Bottom paragraph, page 97.
This is puchando. Let's claim that someone is.
I don't know, it's the only word.
Yeah, no, that's totally me joking around in Spanish, not knowing enough, but knowing a few words. I've completely created Spanish words.
Just create words, man. Which is also like think of the example of like teachers also, like educators have to like realize that their students might be coming from different backgrounds, and their students might be using these strategies, and an educator's job is to like understand if they're using, like when they're using those, so you can help them and assist them, and then kind of like correct them, but like in a nice educated way. So an example would say like some teacher was taking class, and a student came up to her and said, "Can I use the pencil fixer?" And there's no such thing as a pencil fixer, but the teacher recognized that the student wanted to use the pencil sharpener. That the different words, and the student not knowing what's that object called, he kind of just made up his own definition of it.
I wonder, in terms of like state testing policy stuff, I wonder if like a student does something like pencil fixer, like I wonder the impact that has on their score, like if
it's incorrect.
If like the graders are like, oh, this lowers your grade because you don't understand, or if they're
maybe.
like, yeah, get what you're going for.
That could be a good question. I'm pretty sure it will be incorrect in the way of the state correcting the test. I'm pretty sure it will be incorrect.
Write down the question and kind of see how they view different uses of English. Or the fact they put Loleto in there. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I made up that Spanish word.
Which one?
I'm talking about like people just adding O's to the end of English words. Like me and all of my Spanish classes. Like, here's a sentence, couldn't come up with a word, took the English word, just threw an O or an A at the end. My second year Spanish teacher was actually like a native speaker. Whenever we were like learning vocabulary that like actually was like that, she'd be like, I want you to guess what you think this word is in Spanish. And so we'd just like throw it out. She's like, yep. And we're like, yes. anything that reading that was really interesting? From where? Anywhere in there?
Anywhere.
Well,
I feel like for one, I didn't even have to look up a standard, so I was like, oh, what did she put down on that one? But I think it just like tied in a lot with everything else, because it was like language across the curriculum and language as a basis for learning, and so it's just like knowing that language is greater than just one subject, but also like it is difficult that way, because like if you look at it two ways, it can be like, oh, language is everywhere, so that way it should be easier to learn the language because it's like applied throughout each subject matter. But then also, if you aren't learning that well, it will be detrimental in every subject matter to you as well. So, I don't know.
I'm seeing it like end of chapter 4 question. It says grammatical competence is not the same as grammatical correctness. Explain the difference to a classmate. I didn't. Is grammatical competence like actually move like use it how we speak, and grammatical correctness like
I'm not sure.
actually being batteries. Hey, will you hit dismiss? I have a low battery on my phone.
yeah.
And it still records. Last time I figured out. I know we have to get rid of things. And then there was just like me awkwardly being like, stop talking, when you can see it all.
I'm not exactly sure what the correctness is, but the competence was like linguistics. It's a lot. It's phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics.
Okay.
So those were the main 4 areas that they focused on. Grammatical correctness would probably then be slow. Yeah, it doesn't really give an example of the correctness.
Oh yeah. Yeah. My guess would be it would just be like correctness is like, you know, we talked about like prescriptive versus descriptive. I bet it'd be more like prescriptive would be correctness,
Would be, yeah.
and then descriptive would be like
I think when
competence.
grammar also, like when we're writing an essay, we think, oh, gotta make sure this is capitalized, gotta make sure that has a contraction in it and stuff like that. But if we look at like semantics and syntax, that depends on the meaning of the words and like the words around them. So I think like knowing that content instead of just like rules, even though there are rules all over that too. But
Thinking about like ELL students too, the fact that we do like formal essays and stuff, we do write so differently than how we talk, and trying to like teach them like English that they need to know to communicate with other people, but also like, I don't know, talking about, because part of my section is also talking about how the Common Core testing would have an effect on ELL students, and I would think if you want your students to have high scores, you're going to try to teach them the English that would help them do well on a test, but that's really different than the English you would use to communicate with your classmates.
that's true.
I guess it just falls into like the educator's hands of teaching them the difference, which can be difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there'd just be a greater focus on trying to make them overlap and being like, well, this is the more correct form, and then if you want to loosen it up and talk to the people around you, then you can like go ahead and do this. And then I think it also goes back to the communicative competence, that it's not only speaking though, but like for one of yours, like language is more than speaking, it's like the gestures and the movement and the body language and all of that, and knowing what's appropriate and what's not.
Yeah,
What time are we at?
like 49.
Okay. Do we have any other interesting things you want to bring up?
Just the fact that language is, my part was like before, the language is a form of human's action. So you can't really separate it from any part of learning.
Just everything. Yeah.
So like it just real quick, it talked about how like a lot of schools try to like separate language, make it its own subject, which can confuse students. What it should be like, language should be in math, should be in social studies, should be in science, and kind of like make it into a whole.
It's everywhere, guys. It's Every language has no cover.
It's on my face.
I don't know, I think what makes that so complicated though is also in like reading about the because the Common Core, like, you know, you have to have like the literacy standards, or also it talks about the literacy in like math and science and whatever. So it's like it kind of seems like it's trying to have that languages everywhere idea, but also in doing that they make it so that if English is not a student's native language, they can't do well on any section of the test.
Yeah.
I feel like they're like trying to take something that's good,
But they're not.
but they're just
fully-
expecting
yeah.
students to be fluent in English
Yeah.
in like a few months.
Looks
like-
yeah.
Cool idea, guys. Not working.
Alrighty, guys. Well,
Good talk.
End of discussion 6.
go.
Cut.